On a frosty December in Stockholm, while the city bustled with holiday shoppers and the sweet aroma of freshly baked saffron buns filled the air, a quiet storm was brewing beneath the surface. At precisely 2:15 a.m., the serenity of one of Sweden's most prestigious financial institutions, Nordiska Handelsbanken, was shattered. Deep within the labyrinth of its underground vaults, a lone figure moved with methodical precision. Lars Bergström, a 45-year-old plumber, wasn't there to steal riches or jewels. His mission was far more personal, to uncover the truth and clear the name of his best friend, Johan Ekström, who had been accused of embezzling millions from the bank. But Lars's journey into the heart of the bank wasn't born out of greed or rebellion. It began with a phone call, a plea for help, and a decision that would thrust an ordinary man into an extraordinary set of circumstances. Just 2 weeks earlier, Lars had been in his modest Södermalm apartment, enjoying a quiet evening after a long day of work. The cold outside had seeped into his bones, but inside, the warm glow of the fireplace and the hum of the radio offered comfort. Lars's life was simple and unremarkable, much like his personality. He was the kind of man who fixed leaking pipes during the day and spent his evenings tinkering with old radios or watching documentaries on engineering marvels. Then the phone rang. "Lars, it's me," came Johan's voice, strained and frantic. I need your help. They're saying I did something I didn't do. The bank. They think I stole money, but I swear I didn't. You know me?" Johan Ekström, Lars's childhood friend, had always been the genius of their duo. While Lars had pursued a trade, Johan had gone on to study computer science and eventually landed a coveted role as an IT specialist at Nordiska Handelsbanken. To hear that Johan was now under investigation for embezzlement was as shocking as it was unbelievable. "What are they accusing you of?" Lars asked, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of concern. His grip on the phone tightened as he tried to process the panic in his friend's voice. "They say I transferred 25 million Kronor to a shell account," Johan replied, his words rushing out in a frantic torrent. "They claim it was my access credentials, my computer, my signature. Everything points to me. But Lars, you have to believe me. I didn't do it." There was a pause, a brief silence filled with tension, before Johan continued, his voice cracking under the strain. "It's not just a mistake. This isn't some system glitch or coincidence. Lars, I've been set up. There's someone inside the bank, someone powerful, who's orchestrating all of this. They're framing me, using me as the scapegoat for something much bigger." Lars's heart sank as he listened. He could hear the desperation, the disbelief, the sheer weight of the accusation crushing his friend. Johan was one of the most meticulous people Lars had ever known, a man who prided himself on precision and honesty. The thought of him stealing anything, let alone 25 million Kronor, was unfathomable. "Who would do this to you?" Lars asked, his voice soft but firm, already trying to piece together the puzzle. "I don't know," Johan admitted, his frustration palpable. "But they've covered their tracks too well. Every bit of evidence points to me. The logs, the timestamps, the accounts. It's like they planned this down to the last detail, and now the bank's internal audit team and the police are breathing down my neck, asking questions I can't answer." Lars exhaled slowly, his mind racing. "Have you told them it wasn't you, that you've been set up?" "I have," Johan nearly shouted, the strain clear in his voice. "But they don't believe me. Why would they? The evidence is overwhelming, and whoever's behind this, they're smart, Lars. They knew exactly how to make it look like I'm the one who did it." The line went quiet for a moment, save for Johan's uneven breathing. Then, almost in a whisper, he added, "I don't know how much longer I can hold out. If I can't prove my innocence, I'll lose everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom." Lars closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Johan's words. His friend wasn't just asking for help. He was pleading for salvation. Lars had no idea how he would help, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let Johan face this alone. Lars didn't need convincing. He knew Johan better than anyone and trusted him implicitly. But the stakes were high. The evidence against Johan seemed overwhelming. logs of transactions traced to his computer, a record of unusual activity in the bank's internal systems, and testimonies from senior executives pointing fingers at him. "What can I do?" Lars asked, the weight of his friend's plight settling heavily on his shoulders. "There's a vault," Johan said after a pause. "In the bank's sublevels, it's where they store all the backup servers and transactional archives. If I can get the raw data from there, I can prove I wasn't the one who made those transfers." Lars's heart sank. "You're asking me to break into a bank?" "No," Johan corrected. "I'm asking you to save my life." For the next few days, Lars wrestled with the enormity of what Johan was asking. He knew nothing about hacking, high-stakes theft, or navigating corporate corruption. What he did know, however, was plumbing. As he mulled over the problem, an idea began to take shape. Lars had worked on the plumbing systems of countless buildings across Stockholm, including high-security facilities. He understood how pipes connected to infrastructure, how maintenance tunnels were laid out, and how to trace a system back to its origin. If there was a way into the bank that bypassed its formidable security, Lars figured it would be through the plumbing. He began his reconnaissance with the quiet efficiency that had made him a respected tradesman. Over the course of several evenings, he studied the exterior of Nordiska Handelsbanken, noting the locations of manholes, drainage systems, and utility access points. He pored over blueprints he had obtained years ago when a subcontracting firm he worked for had serviced the bank's heating systems. Lars also visited Johan in custody, bringing him updates on his progress and gleaning critical information about the bank's interior layout. Johan described the vault as a steel fortress protected by biometric scanners, coded locks, and a constant surveillance feed. It was a daunting challenge, but Lars wasn't deterred. "We're not just plumbers, Lars," Johan said during one of their conversations, a faint smile on his face despite his dire circumstances. "We're problem solvers, you always said that." On the night of December 18th, Stockholm was blanketed in snow. Lars, clad in a heavy work coat and carrying a toolbox, approached the bank's utility access point. The streets were quiet, the city's residents either asleep or huddled indoors to escape the biting cold. He slipped through an unlocked maintenance door leading to the building's sublevels. The first hurdle was the HVAC system, which he needed to bypass to avoid setting off alarms. Using a set of tools modified for the task, Lars carefully adjusted the pressure gauges and rerouted airflow to mask his presence. The descent into the bank's underbelly was eerily quiet. Pipes lined the narrow corridors, their metallic surfaces glistening with condensation. Lars moved with the precision of a surgeon, his knowledge of plumbing systems guiding him as he traced the route to the vault substructure. His first major challenge came when he encountered a floodgate, blocking access to the main drainage conduit. It was locked with a combination mechanism he hadn't anticipated. Lars cursed under his breath, feeling the weight of time pressing down on him, but ingenuity was his ally. Using a borescope, a tool he often employed to inspect inaccessible pipes, he peered into the lock's internal mechanism and deciphered the pattern. Within minutes, the gate swung open, revealing the path ahead. Reaching the sublevel where the vault was located felt like a small victory, but the real challenge lay ahead. As Johan had described, the vault was a marvel of modern security engineering. The door alone was over 2 feet thick, and the biometric scanner required both a fingerprint and an iris scan. Lars knew he couldn't outsmart the technology, but he didn't need to. The plumbing system had provided an alternate route into the vault, a narrow maintenance duct that ran parallel to the server racks inside. Lars pried open the duct's cover and squeezed through, his body scraping against the cold steel as he navigated the cramped space. Inside the vault, the servers hummed with an almost menacing energy. Lars located the archive drive Johan had described and began extracting the raw data. The seconds stretched into an eternity as the drive copied the files. His heart pounded with every passing moment, knowing that one mistake could trigger the vault's alarms and seal his fate. As Lars scanned the data, something caught his eye. Anomalies in the logs that went far beyond the transactions Johan was accused of. The files pointed to a network of illicit activities spanning years, implicating not just mid-level employees, but senior executives of Nordiska Handelsbanken. bribery, money laundering, and falsified audits were all meticulously documented. Lars realized that clearing Johann's name was only the tip of the iceberg. He was now in possession of evidence that could bring down some of the most powerful people in Stockholm. But it also meant his mission had just become infinitely more dangerous. The story pauses here. With Lars on the brink of completing his mission but standing at a crossroads, would he make it out undetected? And what would he do with the damning evidence he had uncovered? What happens next will push Lars's ingenuity, loyalty, and resolve to their limits. Stay tuned for the rest of the story as we uncover the true depths of the Plumber's Code. It was December 18th, 2021, a Saturday that dawned bitterly cold over Stockholm. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling the sounds of the waking city. For most, it was a day like any other, marked by the familiar rituals of holiday preparations. But for Lars Bergström, it was the culmination of weeks of meticulous planning. Dressed in his worn work coveralls, Lars stood outside the Nordiska Handelsbanken's main utility access point. His heart thudded against his ribs, not from fear, but from the knowledge that what he was about to do would change everything. Not just for him, but for his best friend, Johan Ekström, whose freedom depended on the success of this operation. With his toolbox in hand and a hastily forged maintenance badge clipped to his chest, Lars descended into the bank's sub-level systems. His route was planned down to the minute. He had memorized every turn, every valve, and every potential obstacle in the labyrinth of maintenance tunnels that wound beneath the bank. Lars entered through an unmonitored service door, a relic of the bank's 20-year-old infrastructure that had yet to be modernized. The bitter cold gave way to a damp, metallic chill as he moved deeper underground. Using a map he had reconstructed from old plumbing schematics, Lars made his way to the heart of the system, the water recycling room, which doubled as an access hub for the building's critical utilities. Here, he encountered his first hurdle. A motion sensor had been installed near the main pipe leading to the vault substructure, a recent addition he hadn't accounted for. For a moment, panic clawed at him, but Lars quickly improvised. Using his plumbing tools, he detached a section of pipe and angled it to spray a high-pressure mist across the sensor's lens, disrupting its ability to detect movement. Cautiously, Lars moved past the compromised sensor and reached the narrow maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the bank's main server room. The tunnel, barely wide enough to crawl through, was pitch black and claustrophobic. Lars paused, taking a steadying breath before he wedged himself inside, dragging his toolkit behind him. The vault itself was a technological marvel. Its 2-foot-thick steel door was secured by biometric locks requiring both fingerprint and retina scans, and the entire room was monitored by high-definition cameras. But Lars wasn't planning to open the door. He was planning to bypass it entirely. Through the maintenance tunnel, he had found a weak point, a narrow ventilation duct that led into the vault's server chamber. He used a portable cutting torch, its flame hissing in the confined space to widen the opening. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold air, and he kept one ear tuned for any sign of approaching security. At last, the steel gave way. Lars wriggled through the duct and dropped silently into the vault. The room was bathed in a sterile blue light from the rows of servers humming around him. He located the archive drive Johan had described and connected a portable storage device to copy its contents. As the files began to transfer, Lars glanced around the room, his gaze settling on a locked cabinet marked "Confidential." Curiosity got the better of him. Using a set of precision tools, Lars picked the cabinet's lock and opened it. Inside were binders and hard drives labeled with cryptic titles: Project Iceberg, Nordic Holdings, CEO Communications. Lars's stomach turned as he skimmed the documents. They weren't just records of routine operations. They were evidence of large-scale financial crimes. Money laundering, embezzlement, bribery. Each file revealed another layer of corruption implicating some of the bank's highest-ranking executives. One name stood out: Hans Lindström, the bank's CEO. Lars recognized him from news articles praising his leadership. Yet here, Lindström's name was tied to offshore accounts, fraudulent audits, and even payments to silence whistleblowers. As Lars pieced together the scope of the corruption, a chilling thought occurred to him. Johann's frame-up wasn't just about embezzlement. It was about silencing someone who had stumbled too close to the truth. The archive drive finally beeped, signaling the transfer was complete. Lars pocketed the device and closed the cabinet, his mind racing. He had come to clear Johann's name, but he was leaving with evidence that could unravel a web of deceit stretching far beyond his friend's case. The way back out proved far more harrowing than the way in. The cutting torch he had used to widen the ventilation duct had triggered a heat sensor, and a silent alarm was now active. Lars crawled through the maintenance tunnel as fast as he could, the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the underground corridors. He emerged into the utility hub just as a security team entered the sublevel. Thinking quickly, Lars turned a valve on the main water line, releasing a torrent of water into the hallway behind him. The sudden flood slowed the guards long enough for Lars to slip out through a service hatch into the snowy streets. Outside, his breath clouded in the frigid air as he moved quickly through the shadows. He had stashed a change of clothes in a nearby construction site, and within minutes, Lars was unrecognizable, a regular pedestrian blending into the bustle of Stockholm's winter streets. By the time the bank's security team realized what had happened, Lars was long gone. The break-in made headlines across Sweden. Vault breach at Nordiska Handelsbanken. Millions in data stolen. Public reaction was swift and polarized. On one hand, there was outrage over the breach of a supposedly impenetrable institution. On the other, whispers of the bank's corruption began to circulate, fueled by leaked details from the stolen files. Hans Lindström held a press conference, decrying the act as an attack on our nation's financial stability, and vowing to bring the perpetrator to justice. Yet his confident demeanor couldn't mask the unease in his eyes, a sign that he knew the stolen data could ruin him. Meanwhile, Lars stayed out of sight, knowing that what came next would determine everything. He had the evidence to exonerate Johann, but exposing it would also make him a target. The story ends here for now, with Lars standing at the edge of a moral chasm. Should he risk everything to bring the truth to light, or should he protect himself and Johann by staying silent? What would you do in his shoes? Were you aware of this extraordinary heist? And what do you think of the plumber who cracked the vault in Stockholm? Let us know your thoughts. This story is far from over, and the next chapter could change everything. Stay tuned. With the stolen evidence in his possession, Lars Bergström's first priority was clear: freeing Johann Ekström. His best friend had spent weeks in custody, accused of a crime he hadn't committed, and every day Johann remained behind bars only deepened Lars's resolve. The day after the heist, Lars, clad in a heavy coat and scarf that obscured most of his face, made his way to the Stockholm Police Department. He knew Johann's bail hearing was scheduled for noon, and he intended to use part of the stolen cash to secure his release. The courtroom was small and stark, its walls lined with drab gray paneling. Johann sat at the defendant's table, his usually sharp features dulled by exhaustion. His lawyer, a junior public defender, fumbled with papers as the prosecutor outlined the charges against him: embezzlement of 25 million Kronor, abuse of privileged access, and tampering with bank records. When the judge finally asked if Johann could meet the bail requirement, Johann's lawyer hesitated, but Lars stepped forward. "I'll cover it," he said, his voice firm. The judge looked him over. "And you are?" "An old friend," Lars replied. With a nod, the judge set the bail at 500,000 Kronor. Lars handed over the cash, his heart pounding as he realized how close he was to being discovered. But no one questioned the source of the money, and within the hour, Johann was free. As they left the courthouse, Johann turned to Lars, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "I don't know how you manage this," he said, his voice low. "But thank you." "We're not done yet," Lars replied grimly. "This is just the beginning." The heist at Nordiska Handelsbanken had sent shockwaves through Stockholm, and the police were under immense pressure to solve the case. Commissioner Ingrid Lindqvist, a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for solving high-profile crimes, led the investigation. But from the outset, her team faced a frustrating series of dead ends. The bank's extensive security system had captured hours of footage during the night of the robbery, but when investigators reviewed it, they found nothing unusual. The cameras near the vault had been disabled at precisely 2 a.m., a feat that required insider knowledge of the bank's systems. How does someone break into a vault and leave no trace? Lindqvist muttered as she pored over the footage in her office. No faces, no footprints, nothing. For weeks, forensic analysts combed through the footage, enhancing images and searching for anomalies. But every lead fizzled out, leaving the team with more questions than answers. Lars's entry point through the maintenance tunnels was another focus of the investigation. The tunnels were old and largely undocumented, and while the police found traces of tampering, scorched metal near the ventilation duct, a bent valve in the water recycling system, they couldn't tie the evidence to a specific individual. A maintenance worker interviewed by the police recalled seeing someone in work coveralls near the utility entrance a few days before the heist, but his description was vague. Just a guy with a toolbox. Looked like any other plumber. Fantastic, Lindqvist said dryly when the report reached her desk. We're looking for a plumber in a city full of plumbers. The police hoped the stolen cash would lead them to the culprit. Banks keep meticulous records of serial numbers on large denominations, and the investigators flagged the stolen notes in their system. But Lars, anticipating this, had taken only untraceable bills. 3 weeks after the heist, a tip came in about a man using large sums of cash to pay for groceries in Östermalm. The police rushed to investigate, only to find an elderly pensioner who had withdrawn his life savings in cash after hearing about the bank robbery. Another waste of time, Lindqvist fumed. It's like this guy knew exactly how to stay 10 steps ahead. While the police struggled to piece together the crime, the executives at Nordiska Handelsbanken were unraveling behind closed doors. Hans Lindström, the bank's CEO, held tense meetings with his board of directors, who demanded answers about the stolen data. What do we know? One board member asked during an emergency session. Lindström's face was pale, his usually confident demeanor replaced by visible stress. Nothing definitive, he admitted. But we have to assume the worst. If that data gets out, it could destroy us. Over the next 3 months, paranoia gripped the bank's upper echelons. Lindström ordered internal audits, fired low-level employees suspected of leaking information, and even hired private investigators to track down the thief. But no amount of money or intimidation yielded results. Lars and Johan, meanwhile, worked quietly, but diligently. Johan spent hours decrypting and organizing the stolen data, while Lars planned how to present their findings to the public. They knew the longer they waited, the greater the risk, but they also understood that one wrong move could jeopardize everything. By March 2022, Lars and Johan were ready. They rented a modest conference room in a Stockholm hotel under an assumed name, notifying a handful of trusted journalists about the event. Word spread quickly, and by the time the conference began, the room was packed with reporters, photographers, and cameramen. Lars stood at the podium, his nerves hidden beneath a stoic exterior. Johan sat beside him, his laptop connected to a projector displaying the files they were about to reveal. "Thank you all for coming," Lars began, his voice steady but firm. "Today we're here to expose the truth about what happened at Nordiska Handelsbanken, not just the robbery, but the corruption and deceit that has plagued this institution for years." Over the next hour, Lars and Johan presented their evidence. The files detailed offshore accounts, fraudulent transactions, and payments to silence whistleblowers. They named names, Hans Lindström among them, and backed their accusations with irrefutable documentation. The room buzzed with shock and outrage as journalists scrambled to record every detail. Within minutes, the story was live, spreading across Sweden like wildfire. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Nordiska Handelsbanken. Hans Lindström was fired within hours, along with several other executives implicated in the scandal. Shareholders demanded resignations, and clients began withdrawing their funds in droves. The press conference dominated headlines for days. Whistleblower plumbers expose corruption at Stockholm's largest bank. CEO Lindström dismissed amid banking scandal. But while the public celebrated Lars and Johan as heroes, the police were less forgiving. As the press conference ended, Lars and Johan were approached by a group of plainclothes officers. "Mr. Bergström, Mr. Ekström," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." The journalists, sensing another story, began snapping photos and shouting questions as the two men were escorted out in handcuffs. Johan looked stricken, but Lars remained calm. "It's okay," he whispered to Johan. "This was always part of the plan." The story ends here for now, with Lars and Johan facing an uncertain future. But their actions have already changed the course of events, exposing corruption at the highest levels and forcing a nation to confront uncomfortable truths. What do you think? Were Lars and Johan justified in their actions, or did they go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned as the story of the Plumber's Code is yet to be completed. On June 6, 2022, the Svea Court of Appeal, located in the stately Wrangel Palace in Stockholm, became the epicenter of a legal battle that had captivated not just Sweden, but the world. Lars Bergström and Johan Ekström, now dubbed the Plumber and the Coder by the media, stood accused of breaking into Nordiska Handelsbanken, stealing 2.3 million euros in untraceable cash, and extracting over 50 terabytes of sensitive data from the bank's underground vault. Presiding over the trial was Judge Lennart Axelsson, a respected figure in Swedish law known for his impartiality and calm demeanor. The prosecution, led by senior attorney Carl Sundström, sought to portray Lars and Johan as calculated criminals who had exploited the public's trust to execute a brazen heist. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sundström began in his opening statement, "this case is not about whistleblowers or heroism. It is about theft, conspiracy, and the unlawful dissemination of private data. These two men violated the law, and no matter their intentions, they must face the consequences of their actions." Jean Norström, the defense attorney representing both Lars and Johan, offered a sharp counterpoint. Jean, a well-known advocate for social justice, argued that her clients had acted out of necessity to expose systemic corruption within the bank. "My clients are not criminals," Jean declared, her voice echoing through the ornate courtroom. "They are citizens who, when faced with a broken system, did what was necessary to reveal the truth. The real question here is not whether they broke the law, but why they felt they had no other choice." The stage was set for a trial that would test the limits of Sweden's legal system, forcing the court to grapple with the intersections of morality, legality, and the pursuit of justice. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the specifics of the crime. On the night of December 18, 2021, Lars had infiltrated the bank's underground vault using his knowledge of plumbing systems, bypassing multiple layers of security. Once inside, he had stolen 2.3 million euros in untraceable cash and downloaded over 50 terabytes of data. This data included internal financial records, evidence of money laundering, fraudulent audits, and hidden offshore accounts, confidential communications, emails and memos implicating senior executives, including CEO Hans Lindström, in illegal activities, client information, sensitive details about account holders, including prominent politicians and business leaders. The prosecution emphasized the impact of these thefts, arguing that Lars and Johan had violated the privacy of countless individuals and jeopardized Sweden's financial stability. "They didn't just steal from a bank," Sundström said. "They stole from the trust and security of the Swedish people." However, the defense argued that the theft of the data was not for personal gain, but to expose the corruption within Nordiska Handelsbanken. Gina Norström presented evidence showing that neither Lars nor Johan had attempted to sell the data or profit from the stolen cash. Instead, they had used the evidence to hold a press conference that led to the resignation of multiple executives and an ongoing investigation into the bank's practices. As the trial progressed, the prosecution faced significant challenges due to the lack of direct evidence linking Lars and Johan to the heist. The prosecution's forensic experts admitted under cross-examination that no fingerprints, DNA, or other physical evidence had been found at the crime scene. Lars had been meticulous, using gloves and wiping down every surface he touched. "How can you convict someone without physical evidence?" Jean asked the jury during a heated cross-examination. "You're asking them to fill in the blanks with speculation. not facts. The 2.3 million euros in stolen cash was another weak point in the prosecution's case. While Lars had used part of the money to bail Johan out of custody, the rest remained unaccounted for. "Where's the rest of the money?" Sundström demanded during a particularly fiery exchange. Lars, calm and composed, replied, "I never said I took it for myself. Maybe the people who lost it should ask the bank how it got there in the first place." The remark caused a ripple of laughter in the gallery, much to the prosecution's frustration. The leaked data was both a strength and a liability for the prosecution. While it proved the theft had occurred, it also exposed the bank's widespread corruption, weakening the moral authority of the institution they were trying to protect. Journalists covering the trial seized on this irony with one headline reading, "Thieves are heroes. The men who exposed the rot in Swedish banking." Public opinion about Lars and Johan was deeply divided. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered daily, some holding signs that read, "Free Lars and Johan," while others decried their actions as criminal and reckless. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was equally charged. Witnesses for the prosecution included former employees of Nordiska Handelsbanken, many of whom admitted under cross-examination that they had been pressured to lie or destroy evidence by senior executives. The most dramatic moment came when Hans Lindström himself was called to testify. The disgraced CEO, now under investigation for his own crimes, attempted to shift the blame onto Lars and Johan. "They acted out of greed," Lindström claimed, his voice trembling. "They wanted to ruin me and the bank." Jean Norström pounced on his testimony, presenting email evidence showing that Lindström had approved illicit transactions and orchestrated Johan's frame-up to cover his tracks. "Mr. Lindström," she said, her tone icy, "isn't it true that the only reason we're here today is because my clients revealed the truth you tried so desperately to hide?" Lindström's silence spoke volumes. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and counter-arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. For 2 days, the courtroom waited in tense anticipation. Finally, on July 15, 2022, the jury returned with their verdict. Lars and Johan were found guilty of breaking and entering, theft, and unauthorized access to confidential data. However, the jury stopped short of convicting them on charges of conspiracy or intent to profit, acknowledging the altruistic nature of their actions. Judge Lennart Axelsson delivered the sentencing with characteristic balance. "Mr. Bergström, Mr. Ekström," he said, "your actions, while illegal, have brought to light truths that needed to be revealed. But the law cannot excuse vigilantism, no matter how noble the intent." Lars was sentenced to 4 years in prison, while Johan received a 3-year sentence. Both sentences included the possibility of parole after 2 years. As they were led away, Lars turned to the reporters and made one final statement. "We may have lost our freedom, but we've given Sweden something far more valuable: the truth. That's a price I'm willing to pay." The trial of Lars Bergström and Johan Ekström became a lightning rod for nationwide discussions about the ethics of civil disobedience, the responsibilities of whistleblowers, and the boundaries of personal sacrifice in the pursuit of justice. Their story, though deeply polarizing, illuminated the cracks in Sweden's financial and judicial systems, forcing institutions to confront their own vulnerabilities and shortcomings. For some, Lars and Johan were heroes, ordinary men who had dared to challenge powerful forces, risking their freedom to expose corruption and clear a wrongful accusation. Their actions inspired countless conversations about loyalty, morality, and the lengths to which individuals should go when the system fails. For others, they were reckless vigilantes whose disregard for the law could not be justified, no matter the outcome. The impact of their story extended far beyond the courtroom. In the months and years following their sentencing, Lars and Johan's actions became the subject of several critically acclaimed documentaries, each exploring a different facet of their journey. Films like The Plumber's Code, Breaking the Vault and Loyalty on Trial delved into the technical brilliance of Lars's heist and the emotional stakes of their fight for justice. One documentary, Cracking the System, focused on the enduring friendship between Lars and Johan, framing their story as a testament to the power of loyalty in the face of adversity. Interviews with former colleagues, friends, and even detractors painted a vivid picture of two men whose bond had driven them to defy the odds, exposing truths that would otherwise have remained hidden. These documentaries not only kept their story alive, but also sparked a broader cultural movement in Sweden. Universities hosted debates about the ethical implications of their actions, while think tanks published papers on the fine line between justice and vigilantism. Even international media picked up their story, with major outlets drawing parallels to other high-profile whistleblowers and acts of civil disobedience around the globe. Lars and Johann's trial, their actions and their motivations continued to resonate, leaving an indelible mark on Swedish society. Their case forced a reckoning not just within the banking industry, but also in the broader context of how institutions wield power and accountability. What do you think? Were Lars and Johann justified in their actions, or did they cross a line that cannot be forgiven? Their story raises questions that remain as relevant today as ever. Share your thoughts and stay tuned as we continue to explore this extraordinary tale of courage, loyalty, and the pursuit of justice. If you were inspired, intrigued, or even conflicted by this tale of loyalty, courage, and the pursuit of truth, there's more where this came from. By liking this video, you help us bring more fascinating stories like this to a wider audience. So don't forget to hit that like button. It makes a huge difference. Want to stay updated on the most compelling stories of human resilience and moral dilemmas? Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon. This way, you'll never miss an episode of our deep dives into true crime, unsolved mysteries, and extraordinary events that challenge what we think we know about the world. Do you know someone who would love this story? Share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who enjoys tales that make them think. Whether it's through social media, a group chat, or even an old-fashioned conversation, your shares help spark more debates and discussions. Your support allows us to continue exploring stories that go beyond the headlines, diving into the emotions, choices, and consequences that define human lives. So, thank you for watching, engaging, and being part of this journey. Lastly, if you have any recommendations for stories you'd like us to cover, leave a comment below. We're always on the lookout for extraordinary tales that deserve to be told. Let's keep this conversation going, and as always, thank you for being part of our community. See you in the next episode.